Welcome to A Space to Speak Your Mind,
a radio programme and a podcast about mental health and well-being, made by people with lived experience as part of the Wellbeing Group run by Cornwall Mind.
We do occasionally cover subjects that some listeners may find distressing.
For more information, help and support, please visit cornwallmind.org.
A Space to Speak Your Mind with Cornwall Mind.
I'm Lauren.
And I'm Kim.
And I'm Shannon.
On today's programme, following from my chat with Richard last month around autism and neurodivergence, I'll be speaking with Kim and Shannon about their experiences.
We welcome back to the show Louise Morpeth from Brain in Hand to find out how to embrace those with neurodivergence in the workplace.
We'll catch up with Calum, who was on the show back in December, to see how the last year has been since being part of the Falmouth Radio group.
And we will check in with Clare, who was also part of the Falmouth group in August of last year, to see how poetry and creative writing has helped her with her mental health. She'll also be speaking to Antenna from the Cornwall Mind Write Yourself Well group.
Plus, Richard will also be speaking to Sarah Hodkinson, Head of Psychosocial Services, Shooting Star Children's Hospice, on how much support is needed for those experiencing child bereavement.
A Space to Speak Your Mind with Cornwall Mind.
Hello everyone, I'm Lauren and I'm introducing Kim and Shannon.
Hi.
Hi.
And on today's show we're talking about neurodivergence and about autism. So I'll go to you, Kim.
Hello. I was recently diagnosed, with autistic traits, which was a great shock to me personally because I didn't recognise myself as having those traits or problems, I suppose. I'll pass it over to Shani.
I suppose because I worked with people with autism and learning difficulties, and I was with Kimberly when she had her assessment, it made perfect sense to me, especially because I could kind of cast similarities between how some of the people I supported dealt with situations to how Kimberly deals with situations. Even though she's quite high on the spectrum, there's still those similarities with situations and social situations especially. So it wasn't a surprise, it actually made sense to me, but I can understand having that diagnosis is quite scary and it does make you question everything about yourself.
Yeah, it did make me question quite a lot, to be honest. But it did then make a little bit more sense about how I was when I was younger, because I found school quite difficult. Making friends was not difficult, just very hard to maintain. Yeah, so little things like that. And then as I got older, the way I was very different to people when I went to work was quite interesting because that sort of showed me how strange I felt inside.
I suppose it is like a lot of people haven't been properly diagnosed, or a lot of people haven't had it dealt with when they were younger. So now you've got a massive generation coming in that have autism or ADHD or even mild learning difficulties, and they've just been thrown into this adult world expecting to cope as normal, typical people. And yeah, it's probably really overwhelming. Do you think it is?
Yeah, I think work. I don't know about you, Lauren, but I found that a lot more difficult. So I worked in cafes, I've worked in a bakery, and I've worked in a hotel as a room cleaner. And I found the social aspect really difficult. So dealing with customers and having to put a smile on your face, which, like, everybody always said how lovely I was, which always felt really bizarre because inside I was panicking like nothing. But just sort of dealing with the general public was really hard, and there were a lot of tears in my sort of working years. And realising now that that might be because I am neurodivergent is somewhat less scary. Like, going to work is not as scary because I can now find and navigate to jobs and careers that will help me.
So with my experience, I work-wise was a caravan cleaner in a team of 4 by Brandon Trust, the employment side. And then I did bar work, waitressing, and that was it really. And I didn't work since. I've only did voluntary work for 11 years. And same with Cornwall Youth Theatre on a Sunday. And now I did the college course from 2003 to 2009. And then I went to Drama Express with complex needs to do voluntary work and be a performer, get to sing, act and do like pantomimes. Did that for 2 years, and now I'm with my pantomime now, and I'm having a great time. And the organisations, and now I've signed up with Cornwall Mind and Gig Buddies. They help. We always have a social night once a month run by Brendan Trust, and it helps to play games and interact. And this time it'll be longer hours, and then I can't wait.
Sounds really exciting.
I have a question, Lauren. How does it feel working environments catered to people with neurodivergent tendencies?
It depends on the assessment, really, I think, with the way people come across. I know they don't show it, but it's hidden. Mine is. And the way you come across, you observe everything, and you try not to be too close. You respect each other's boundaries, and you don't want to overstep. Those are my 3 rules I always consider. And it's just a struggle, and you empathise, and you can sense the body language, and you don't want to, like I said earlier, overstep. So how about you, Kim?
I do a lot of drawing and painting. I find that really calms me down and focuses my mind. So I tend to overthink a lot of situations. I don't know about you, but
yes, I do.
Yeah, it's just overcomplicate things that should be really simple, and I know that, which makes it worse. So when I'm doing art, it just focuses the mind, and I found it particularly useful because I burnt out a couple of years, 5 years ago now, and went into psychosis, which was obviously quite devastating at the time, but I found that just doodling and drawing really kept me going and really got me out of it. So
I'm the same as well. In my drawings, I draw Disney characters, and the way that you see it on TV and the films, that's the way I do it. I know it might come across babyish, but I don't give a hoot. But it's just the way I express myself, and I do have an art book and I do doodling, and it's just the way you express yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's the best way to express yourself, I think, if you're a little bit scared about how to be yourself in front of other people. So I find it that I often feel like I have no personality, or that I can't judge people right. So I find it difficult sometimes as an adult to make new friends and acquaintances. Whereas when I'm just doing my art, that it's just literally feel free to be whatever I want to be. Might not be very good at it, but I will give it a jolly good go, and it just calms me right down. It just puts away all the, like I said, overthinking, and allows me to just focus on one thing at a time. Because I have a tendency, like I said, to overthink, and I will have 100 tabs open in my head, and there'll only be 1 or 2 real problems, but that's the way I like to think of it. And whereas when I'm drawing, I'm focusing on like maybe a reference if I want to draw from reference, or I'm focusing on my own imagination. I'm shutting down all the tabs that are open and just leaving the 1 or 2 there to focus on, and that quietens me internally. I don't know if it's the same for you.
With me, for example, when I'm at my theatre practice, when I get a script and I open it up and I put my own words in, seeing what I hear from the other cast members, to seeing what they said. And because I used to be in stage management in Cornwall Youth Theatre for 11 years, and then I did the stage management side, and I took notes and added, and that got me more practice. And I even did it recently for my rehearsals, and it makes me proud that how far I've come to do all this, and I get the opportunity to do it, and I got more speaking lines this year. I heard that you used to be working with Greenlight. I have heard about it, I have seen the advertised, but I didn't know how to delve into it. I thought I had to confide into my family first before I do it myself, and which route to go through.
Well, a bit about Greenlight. So Greenlight is a company in Cornwall that houses and supports people with autism and learning difficulties, and anybody under that spectrum. they all come in or have been in different care environments, or they come in at 18, and depending on them, they're individual, they get placed in different houses and they have their own support catered to them. How you get onto that, I think a lot of the parents, especially if they're younger than 18, they're already a part of some care agencies in Cornwall and they kind of get transitioned into green light, or they're already part of the council, or I think it's probably quite a complicated process. They tend to come in at 18, or we take them from other companies like Brandon's Trust, for example. We share a lot of clients, or some of them have come from, which is really sad, mental health facilities. So the support they get given completely depends on the person. I was in a communal house where we had 4 individuals and everybody was completely different, and how we supported them was completely different. The thing about Green Light, which is really lovely, which they don't have in the whole of the UK at the moment, is they have something called a behavioural team. So I don't know if you've ever heard of PBS. So PBS comes from America and it's positive behavioural therapy. They mostly tailor around children and their school environment and how to get the best out of children. Green Light ethos was to try and get people to live the life that they could be really proud of. So they brought in behavioural therapists and they basically were like, we need to tailor our care on that, and they have done, which is amazing. So everybody has a PBS plan and it's really good, and it definitely makes you look at things a lot differently. So for example, there is no telling anybody off for behaviours. There is no negativity involved. It's all about positive reinforcement, like positively helping somebody make a cup of tea, and the positive implications of being independent and helping people with autism and learning difficulties to live independently as possible, instead of having that negative view on autism and learning difficulties, which I think over the years is probably a bit ingrained in society, really, isn't it? So it's just saying that they're not any different, they can do things. I think it just needs to be that bit of encouragement and positivity, really.
You just gave me an example with that. I did the Dreadnought Centre for 11 years and they helped me a lot with my autism side, and we were the first Aspires group in 2004, and then we had one-to-one as well with the main person, and it was really good. And then in the February you always have a presentation night and like a disco kind of thing to celebrate everyone's achievements and everything else. And then I did 2 groups. Wednesday evening, only a group for autistic children, and then the Thursday evening it was any issues, and it was really good and I really enjoyed it. Then we have a debrief at the end, and I got along really well with the team.
It's great to see the positive side of it. My experience is obviously completely different because I dealt with a lot of the severe side of autism and learning difficulties. We dealt with a lot of people who were non-verbal or had a lot of compulsive. It was a lot different, but it was amazing when you have those little achievements and you can laugh and smile together, and you get home at the end of the day and you think, oh wow, what a job I've got. Like I've just, I don't know, spent all day holding a party for somebody because they love parties, and and it's been a real big achievement when we've been like, oh my goodness, we've been able to take them all around a shop today, and they're really happy, and like you get that happy energy back, and it's so good. Obviously there is another side to that care, which is I'm a very outgoing, happy person, and it's really hard not to be like that. So it's really hard not to have that empathy side. Oh, I just want to make it better. But actually on their plan, you can't do that, and you can't be all happy and bubbly all the time, because actually that makes them a little bit worse. So I learned personally that I had to change the way I work with people, change the way that I had to be, and like it was difficult for me, but also it taught me that actually as somebody who is neurotypical, that we maybe should have a little bit of actually how should we approach that person, how should we approach situations, because we just do it as ever we want to do it, but actually that's not right by the person, and we're actually making it worse for them instead of making it better. So it's learning like how we should work around other people and make them feel included in their environment, and especially like in the workplace, for example. It's good to kind of have that training and that know-how, like, okay, well, in this situation I just need to give them space and then let them come back to me after 20 minutes instead of being like, are you all right? Just leaving them to kind of reprocess everything that's just happened.
Yeah, so you empathise with a severe and different spectrum kind of thing. So for me, mine is mildly, and with your experience is long and severe, and it breaks my heart. It really does, and it touches me a lot, because when I went with Brandon Trust, we did 100 Voices trip a couple of years back, and I see the difference between myself and severe, and I feel blessed, and I empathise and very touched, and it's just, you just want to give them a big hug, don't you?
Yeah, you do, and it's really difficult not to feel bad for them, but at the same time, like, that's their life, that's what they're living, and you've just got to make it however they want to live. And I think that's where the enjoyment comes out of it, is, yeah, they are severely autistic, and a lot of society would be like, oh, they can't do anything, but actually they're going around making their own drinks and helping with their own dinners, and, you know, they might plan their day out. I mean, it might not come across to us that they're doing that. They might not be able to fully speak, or they might not be able to communicate in the way that we're communicating, but they are communicating. It's just learning how to take our communication into a format where we can understand them, which is, I think that's the most difficult, is learning how they work and what they want in life, basically, and how can we transfer that into our skills.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Shannon, for joining me on the radio station.
Thank you for having us.
This is a space to speak your mind.
Now let's welcome back to the show Louise Morpeth from Brain in Hand to find out how to embrace those neurodivergence in the workplace, talking to Victoria.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
I'm here with Dr. Louise Morpeth, the CEO of Brain in Hand, and you've just commissioned some research about ADHD in the workplace ahead of ADHD Awareness Month. Would you like to tell us more about that?
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here. We wanted to understand what neuroinclusivity was like in the workplace, so we talked to employees and employers. And we found it's quite a concerning picture. So for employees, 47% of neurodivergent employees are actually considering leaving their jobs in the next year because of difficulties they're experiencing. It's only 1 in 5 employees are disclosing to a manager that they are neurodivergent. So on the one side, we have employees who really are not experiencing a neuroinclusive world. And then on the other side, we have employers who know that they're missing out on neurodivergent talent. They know that there is something more that they could be doing, but they lack confidence and understanding about what to do. And they think it's going to cost them lots of money and they don't have a budget. So we have quite a situation, but we also have an opportunity to really improve things for employers and employees.
Were you surprised by these statistics?
Do you know I am? I mean, I run a company that has 50% neurodivergent employees, so I know the kind of lived experience, and I know that it takes some effort to create cultures where people can thrive. But I was surprised that, for example, 14% of employees have told nobody about their neurodivergence at work. So the scale of the problem really did surprise me, but also how that translates into the sort of financial impact for businesses. So if we think about a company that isn't very neuroinclusive, and we were able to shift it to providing sufficient support, that has an impact on sickness absence, on retention, on the likelihood of someone staying in their job, and on their productivity, so much so that it could be quantified as being worth about £20,000 a year to that employer if they could get that right. So I was surprised both by the extent of the problem and actually how it makes good business sense to do something about it.
Do you think a lot of neurodivergent people are struggling in the workplace with the current situation, like how everything's set up?
I think the first thing is they're struggling about whether they should disclose. So a lot of organisations, to use a sort of terminology, aren't psychologically safe. So they don't know that if they said to a manager, I've just had an autism diagnosis, I really would benefit from adjustments. So I think that's where employees are coming from. And then employers, if a manager is told that they have a colleague who has ADHD, they just don't really know how to respond. And I think that nervousness then translates into them avoiding asking questions and having a conversation, whereas the most important thing to do is actually start the conversation. There are legal ramifications if someone is disclosing a disability at work, and if an employer doesn't do something about it.
What do you think can be done? Like, what are the kind of key adjustments and considerations for neurodivergent people in the workplace?
Well, I think about it in three different ways. So the first thing is thinking about creating a psychologically safe environment where people can be open, have a conversation and not worry that they're going to be treated differently or miss out on promotion opportunities. The second thing is actually there's a lot we can do for all employees that make their experience better. So I'll give you a very practical example. At Brain in Hand, what we do when anyone starts at our company, we ask them what do they need to be their best self at work. That's regardless of whether they're neurodivergent. They might be going through the menopause, they might have childcare responsibilities, so what do they need? And then we also say, like, how do you best work? If you were to get feedback at work, do you prefer that to be given verbally or in writing? Do you want it in the moment? Do you want it afterwards? When you process information, do you need a bit of time once someone said something to think it through and respond? Or are you a quick thinker who's able just to respond in the moment? If we can understand how each other works and operates, regardless of whether we're neurodivergent, we're going to have more productive cultures. We're all going to be our better selves at work. But the third thing is there may be specific adjustments that are required for someone. They may require some funding. And in some cases, it might be useful to have an occupational health assessment just to make sure the right adjustments are in place for that individual to flourish.
And how about, do you advise if someone's like looking for work in the initial stages, they haven't got a job yet, they're looking at what they could do?
I would look for little signs that the employer that they're approaching has an awareness. So if an employer is a disability confident employer, that would give you a sign that they're going to be more neuro-inclusive. Little things like if you're applying for a job and you get an interview and you say, well, it would really help me if I could have the questions in advance because I need a bit more processing time. How does the employer respond to that? So it is worth trying to just get a sense of whether an employer is neuro-inclusive, and increasingly people are taking steps just to make that process easier. I think pushing yourself into an environment where it isn't neuro-inclusive can be really challenging and probably won't work out.
What does Brain in Hand's coaching programme, what does it offer? You've kind of touched on it. What's the coaching programme?
So what we want to do is help people achieve more in work and education. And we combine human support, so real human coaches, and an app which enables people to be coached kind of in the moment as they go about their day. And we're there 24/7. So if someone is encountering difficulties at work and needs some help there and then, we can be available to them to help them just get their day back on track. So we want people to flourish in work, and we do that through a coaching approach.
Fantastic. Where would people find out more about the programme and about the research?
So everything will be on our website, so that's braininhand.co.uk. We've also produced some really nice guides for employers of things that they can do that won't cost them anything to make their organisations more neuro-inclusive. And all of the research, including all the kind of financial analysis and modelling, is available there as well. So we'd welcome people to come and have a dig through that and benefit from it. I think we're getting to the point where people are becoming aware. The next thing is, can they start having the conversation about, well, what does that actually mean for someone with ADHD in work? What small changes can we make to enable that person to be more productive and to flourish? So moving the conversation from awareness to action.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate that. It's been great to chat to you.
And you, thank you so much.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
It's time to join the Falmouth Radio group now, and we're hearing from Calum, who was on the show back in December, to see how the last year has been since being part of the group, chatting to Clare and Victoria.
Hi Calum, welcome back to the show.
Hi.
Hi Victoria.
Hello.
Welcome. Tell us, when were you last on the show?
So I was last on the show for December 2024. So that was the last one of last year. And it was focusing in with, it was on the show discussing an awful lot to do with addiction, which was a particular subject of my focus at the time, really.
Can you just remind us a bit about your addiction?
Yeah, so I was an alcoholic. I began drinking when I was really rather young. I was about 10. It was really quite young. It was a very heavy drinking family, and they just kind of normalised an awful lot of it around. Essentially, it kind of came to a head when I was in my late 20s, and I began being quite ill with it. And, you know, I'm 33 now, and in December 2024 was when I decided to knock it on the head. And I'm 9 months dry now, and essentially it's made a rapid transformation which I thought would do the opposite at the time.
Let's listen to a little bit from when you were last on.
I was addicted to first nicotine and then alcohol. My family are alcoholics. They've lost many members of the family to alcohol-related diseases, and I have mental health issues that very much fit the bill of bipolar. I'm waiting to be assessed. However, alcohol was causing me life problems which I could see would lead to serious trouble, like whether that be prison, whether that be hospitalisation, and essentially it made it impossible for me to realise how I can benefit my mental health in the medium to long term, because I couldn't tell what was working because I was drunk. And on top of that, we have a society that promotes that I get together with my friends and get drunk as often as possible. So that is what made me take a step out and try and do something about this, because I realised I was supposed to stay there by market forces that were benefiting massively from giving me their money over the bar and over the counter. Meanwhile, I was getting worse, so I couldn't see the point.
Okay, so that's given us a little bit of awareness of how you were then. How are you now?
So the transformation started happening pretty immediately. Like, my energy levels spiked up in January and February, which is rare for me because normally it's a fairly glum part of the year. So I found myself running in various strange weathers and doing training down at the jungle gym at the middle of the night, and just having lots of a very different sort of way of life, because I didn't modulate my sleep time with alcohol anymore. And I slowly tapered down so that, at the doctor's request, so that I wouldn't damage my liver or anything. November sort of time was last year to sort of, trim it down so that I could stop. And essentially I started getting involved with a local Cornwall Tai Chi, which is also called Seahorse Arts on YouTube, and getting in touch with my sort of more spiritual side. I was a lot more interested in this in uni in my early 20s, and I didn't drink as much then. So I thought, reconnect those wires, as it were, and I was suddenly able to control an awful lot of my feelings, senses of panic, senses of depression or hyperactivity, all of the things that I didn't want at the wrong time, spoiling my sleep and so on. And that began to open an awful lot of doors.
So would you say there's been, so you've given an example of attending Tai Chi lessons. Do you think there's been ample opportunities for your recovery?
I owe a lot to the Arwenack area that provide us a very beautiful place for me to recover in booze. And I definitely think that having a place as gorgeous as this to run around, to swim in, to go and take part in the community activities there are here, it's a really wonderful town. That they all contributed to not just a sort of a cessation of alcohol, but a recovered person, a person who was able to do things that were written off, that I would find too terrifying to do, whether that be speaking in front of people, whether that be engaging in some uncomfortable conversations, which I had with some of my community engagement projects since. There's lots of examples, but the Tai Chi was the first step in finding that direction, I have to say. Wouldn't be there without it.
So did that kind of provide a platform for your recovery, you feel?
Absolutely. So essentially, to be able to replace booze in my life as it was to replace going to the pub pretty ad hoc, more or less every day, be around a large plethora of strangers that I would also then be quite competitively drinking with myself, because I would be moderating my unwanted feelings with this drink. And essentially with the Tai Chi, it suddenly became a completely less toxicological way of modulating and managing those unwanted feelings as you try and go about things that you want to do. Go to a group, talk to somebody, go to a class, try out for a job, whatever.
And I guess being around different people as well, different people from who you were used to hanging out with before.
This is it. The spread of people was probably more drastic for changing me than the lack of alcohol was. It's just the fact that those new people, that new spread of people, that new sort of social ecosystem wouldn't have been accessible to me if I had not succeeded for longer than 3 months. The whole point was I got the effects I started wanting and still have now after about 3 months. The key is to maintain the motivation to carry it on, because even after 8 weeks of drinking just a bit of alcohol, there is residual effects in your endocrinology, your glands, and also in your nervous system. So it has a way longer term effect than we ever thought, but the literature is quite clear on it, and most people who drink don't realise that. They think that they recover in a day and they're okay, but no, it affects them long term. And it became a big game shifter when I suddenly found that, like, I was interacting with people that were very different from me as I got involved with the constituency Labour Party to try and help encourage things in the right direction. I did an awful lot of organising to respond against the proposed disability cuts. But that was a massive example where I wouldn't have been able to engage with a lot of people because it would have been too stressful had I not gone and done this.
So tell us, are you sort of positive about your learning?
Absolutely. Learning has been everything in terms of making me believe that there's a future beyond this. The learning has only been possible due to me recovering, but the point is that the learning means that there's now a desire for maintaining that recovery rather than a nostalgia for bringing it back, because I feel that I miss the glorious days. It's flipped that perception for me massively, which is probably a bigger driver than anything else, to be honest.
So how has your learning helped you with your recovery?
So I started off by going on a welding course because I decided I wanted to develop some more physical skills, and I've always loved metalwork. I've always been a nerd for either swords, guns, tanks, so on and so forth. Always really quite like cars. So then I just kind of got interested in the practice of welding, and there was a free boot camp course to do a level 2 at Truro College, and I jumped on it. That, because it was a completely new set of fresh skills, I didn't really do much of that growing up. It suddenly meant that I knew what to look out for when I had some blind spots, you know, some things I could pay more attention to detail. But it's okay, you learn, and then essentially I've left with a confidence to do a new skill, which is something as cool as welding. I couldn't do loads of intricate welding, but to be able to just merge two bits of metal together properly it's like drawing with electrical lava. I can't describe it any other way, but it's very cool.
And you're now studying for a master's?
Yeah, so rewilding and ecology. There's lots of destroyed former industrial land all over Cornwall, and I've always had a bit of a dream to be able to do a rewilding, take part in rewilding projects, maybe one day lead one in Cornwall to regenerate some of the old and dead industrial land, because we're a beautiful county. It could be done, and it would have social benefits, economic benefits, as well as benefiting nature. And there's now a master's course for me to get involved with that, So
you're being very busy at the minute?
Yes, yeah, don't give me too much time to think myself into a trouble. But essentially, it's good to be busy. I feel there's a new renaissance in my life because of this decision. It's been monumental. So,
what's the one piece of advice you would give to someone if they were sitting in your shoes from like last December?
Start small. Do not attempt anything that could be in any way kind of imposingly large a task in any one singular go. Start small and never be afraid to ask for help, because nearly everybody, especially people who've made any successes out of things, have asked for help quite a few times. So don't ever be afraid for that. Life's too short.
This is a space to speak your mind.
Time to hear from Anne Taylor from the Cornwall Mind Write Yourself Well group, talking to a space to speak your mind, Clare.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
Hi Anne, welcome to the show. So you are associated with Cornwall Mind and you run the creative writing sessions, and we would love to hear a bit more about what you do and these sessions.
Sure, thank you, Claire. Very good to be here. I'm a creative therapeutic writing facilitator rather than creative writing teacher. And the sessions I run focus on using writing for well-being. I've run them in various different settings. It's called Write Yourself Well course for Cornwall Mind for 5 years now.
And would you like to tell us a bit about your background with regard to creative writing?
For many years I was a health journalist and writer, and I was a lecturer at Falmouth University, and then I ended up doing a master's degree in creative writing and personal development, which focused a lot on this idea of using writing therapeutically. And slowly over the last 12 years, I've started to make that my main focus. So running groups, as I say, in a variety of settings. I started working with medical students and doctors. I've run writing groups with carers, with patients. I've run them in various community settings. The regular one I do at the moment is for Cornwall Mind, so for people with mental health challenges.
And can you tell us a bit more about this course and how it benefits those with mental health?
Well, there's a lot of evidence going right back to the 1980s, which shows that expressive writing can benefit not only mental health, but physical health as well. So a psychologist called James Pennebaker started a research project. He found out that getting people to write for 4 days in a row, just for, I think, 10 or 20 minutes about a traumatic experience, really improved their physical and mental well-being. He recognised that people were going to the doctor less, for example. This research has been repeated probably thousands of times now in various settings. A lot of them have been in medical settings, but also in other places as well. So there's lots of evidence to show that writing expressively can benefit well-being, but there's also lots of research now around writing or practicing gratitude. So keeping a gratitude journal can be really good for us, and evidence to show that writing can change our neuroplasticity and put us in a better, more positive space. Stop rumination. And underlying all this, of course, is the idea that creativity as a whole generally is good for us. I think it works on a number of levels, really. So I can say a bit more about how I think my groups benefit people, but maybe I should say something about how I started the groups and what the groups entail, and then we can talk a bit more about what I've seen happening. So I was invited by John Gladstone at Cornwall Mind to run a face-to-face writing group, and we devised a 6-week series of 2-hour workshops. As I say, they were run face-to-face in the Penryn office, what was then the Cornwall Mind office, and I think I only ran that once or maybe twice, and then lockdown happened, but essentially it went online and the course stayed the same. So what it is, it's a series, as I say, of 6 2-hour workshops in which people, and we make sure numbers are no more than 6 people, so they're very supportive, safe spaces for people. And we use poetry and other writing prompts to inspire expressive writing and creative writing. The focus is very much not on craft and, perfecting your writing skills, but it's on using writing as a form of self-expression. The focus is on the process. We write to prompts together, and then people are invited to share, but they don't have to share if they don't want to. People usually tend to. And there's something very powerful about having your words witnessed in that safe, supportive space. So, we use poems, we use guided visualization, different kinds of prompts, writing from objects, a whole kind of array of things. And what I do is I encourage people to start keeping a journal, and in every session I'll give people or share some different journal writing techniques for people to make sure they have a toolbox of things they can do or use on their own, so that when the course finishes they can use writing for self-care in their own time. So that's a bit about the course. It's called Write Yourself Well, the series. So it's just called it a course, but it's actually not a course. It's a series of standalone workshops. So people can't make all of them. We encourage them to, but if people can't make all of them, it doesn't matter if you come to 5 of the 6. You don't miss out on a key piece of the course or anything.
What do you enjoy most about delivering the course?
I enjoy facilitating the groups because there's a real sense of connection, and I feel very, very often people find it very valuable. So of course it's really nice to feel that you're helping people. I've had people say that the course has been life-changing for them in terms of being able to perhaps find their voice again after not being able to communicate after a trauma. I think what it does is the free writing that we do and the creative writing frees something up in people so that they can express feelings that they haven't been able to express before in a way that it doesn't necessarily mean confronting something. We use metaphor and different other creative devices to allow people to explore their feelings in a way that's safer.
And now you also run general creative writing sessions open to not only those suffering with mental health. Can you tell us anything about them?
I'm a Feldenkrais practitioner, which is a somatic movement method. At the moment, I'm running workshops that involve or combine the two. So there's movement and expressive writing and poetry. I also run a Friday morning class for people, some of whom might have done the Mind series before, but that's open to the public. So it's Friday morning 2-hour workshop, which run in the kind of similar vein to the course I run for Mind. And yeah, just generally open to running workshops in various settings. So my website is poetryandmotion.studio, and people can just email me if they want to know more. My email address is on the website. It's annetaylor.writer@gmail.com.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. And what piece of advice would you give someone who's considering creative writing for their mental health?
I would recommend maybe starting to keep a journal. I think people find it intimidating. You have a journal which is full of blank pages. I would say find some simple prompts that you can use. So, for example, one of my favourites and one I share to participants on the course is just perhaps keep a journal by your bed and either kind of write down your dreams first thing in the morning, or last thing at night you could write down one thing you felt that day or are feeling at that moment, one thing you've achieved, and that could be as small as getting out of bed, because let's face it, some days if we're experiencing mental health challenges it might be difficult to get out of bed. So if you got out of bed and put the washing on or done even the smallest thing, if you write it down it can be seen as an achievement. And the other thing is to write down one thing you're grateful for. So I think we can always find something that we're grateful for, and so if you write those 3 things down at the end of the day, it's kind of a nice way of bookending your day somehow and focusing on the positive. Another thing that you can do is keep a list of things that make your heart sing. So just make a mental note to be on the lookout for things using all your senses that perhaps just give you a glimmer of hope or joy in the day, and just make a note of them in your journal. So it doesn't have to be a case of writing reams and reams every day about how you're feeling and writing reams and reams every day of creative writing or descriptive writing. You can start small and just focus really on the process rather than the craft in the first instance. And of course, my other piece of advice would be, if you're at all interested in joining one of these workshops, you can look on the Cornwall Mind website and self-refer. So I think there's a link there where you can register your interest.
Thank you very much. It's been very insightful.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on board.
Thanks again to Anne Taylor from Cornwall Mind Write Yourself Well group for joining us on the show. Now let's hear again from Calum and Clare.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
Today we have Clare to the show. So I understand that you've written a poem in the last week that you've come to recite here for us. What's that poem regarding about?
It's talking about some of the emotions you can feel when you have a mental illness like I have suffered from. So I've just put that down onto the page. So in your own time, would you like to begin your recital of your poem? Yes,
please,
of
Clare?
course. Thank you. I once walked among strangers peacefully and enlightened by the pleasant experience, also walking the same precious pathway as them, my feet firmly on the ground, sharing the earth's offering in all its glory and wholeheartedly partaking in great spirit and emotion. But now I'm asked to question my self-doubt, lack of worth, and long for my once proud existence. I look to a higher being to guide me as I seek solace in my despair, but my wisdom and virtue will aid me in my mission to be free from guilt and fear of failure. To those zealous strangers I worry I am a burden, an unlit flame in a place where the fire is always blazing. I don't call upon the strangers for help, but reach to those I consider paramount in my vulnerable state. Soon I will return to life's daily accomplishments, healed and awakened, and welcomed to those streets by those strangers once again.
Wow, that was incredibly moving and beautiful words there. I really like the sort of open-ended flow of it. I was raised on very choppy rhythmic poems, and it's very nice to hear like a much more longer flow to that. So I guess the first thing that I want to ask about that is, what were the main emotions that were coming through to you as you were writing this?
It just took me back to a place where I wasn't really myself, and so the theme of the poem is strangers, and how for me, when I had this mental health problem, I felt in despair and feeling all these negative emotions around people that I felt inferior to. And I was really suffering inside. I wasn't able to live the same way and walk among people in the city where I was in Manchester as I could before.
I see, yeah. So somewhat of a stranger onto yourself at that time.
Yeah.
And like, I can imagine really, because I too have done some city living, and there's an incredible tide of strangers in a city. And in humanity, we long for connection, especially when times are tough. And it can be very, very isolating when you're in like that city environment as well. Another thing that struck me is that there's a sense of journey of self-return. I want to come home. I want to come home to self, which is always, you know, the bright shining bit on the hill at the end of these kinds of stories, I guess. And like, do you feel close to that, far from it, or would you feel that like it's an ongoing journey? How do you feel in response to that?
Yeah, I say it's a bit of a mixture between an ongoing journey and sort of it being part of my past.
Yeah.
Because even though I've recovered from mental illness, it's still apparent that I could at any moment, I could return back where I was if I don't continue with my self-improvement.
Yeah. So self-improvement being the key driver there then.
Yes.
And what would you define your self-improvement as? Would it just to feel less of a stranger in terms of yourself and other people, or would it be to have certain like achievements or goals to them?
Yeah, it's just to continue to be around people and been able to go about daily life in a way that I could before my mental health.
Yeah, to reclaim that sense
and have that confidence. So some of the themes are looked at in here. So it's talking about self-doubt and lack of worth and longing for my proud existence that I had before.
Absolutely.
And not feeling these negative emotions.
No, absolutely. And I can identify personally with too experienced a huge wealth of that. And it wasn't poetry for me, it was more creative writing and music, but still very much brought that return to a sense of self-belief, which is fantastic. So would you say that there was an awful lot about society which drove you to this point of difficulty, or would you say that there was definitely things that the UK and either doctors or GPs or just social care or wider communities can make for better help for you in this difficult time?
So when I came back from my year abroad, I went to South America to work for a year. I came back very unwell. I say very, that's how it felt for me at the time. Whether the doctors, that's the question, whether they felt I was very unwell is another question actually. And so it was difficult at the time for the doctors and professionals to pinpoint what illness I had. But I definitely knew that something was wrong and I was not doing very well at my studies in my final year. I did pass my degree and finish my studies without even taking any time off, but I had to take time off afterwards to recover. And that's when I started turning to writing, and because I had all this time on my hands. But there were professionals here in Cornwall that gave me a lot of support. But I felt maybe while I was at university there could have been more of a support bubble out there to help someone like me that maybe wasn't able to identify that I was very unwell until I was told by my family members who noticed there'd been a definite decrease in my mental health. And so it was not until they noticed these issues that they could help me.
It was people close to you that noticed the character shift.
Yes.
And then they encouraged you to be more persistent with demands for help. Would you say that's right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that you're right. If like people coming out of education, university, where they don't have a massive network, to have some sort of community network is actually vital and would soften the landing for a lot of people.
And also there is counselling, there is that available, but the issue is also you have to, often you're put on a waiting list and it can take a really long time to get the treatment you need. I've recovered now, so I'm able to write this poem looking back on how I felt at the time. As I mentioned, even though I have recovered, I still need to be very wary about my mental health issues and make sure that I don't have a decline in my mental health in the future. So I do have to listen to my doctors and professionals still and just take into account what they told me in the past so that I don't return to that state again.
Absolutely. I like the Buddhist way of phrasing this, which is a cultivation of self-care and self-worth and, you know, to grow it like a garden, like Voltaire said. So I like that. Thank you so much for coming along and sharing that. And it's fantastic. And we'd gladly have you on again to share any more future writings.
Thank you.
Now we welcome Sarah Hodkinson, Head of Psychosocial Services at Shooting Star Children's Hospices, to explain how more support is needed for those experiencing child bereavement. Talking to Richard.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
Every week in the UK, families face the unthinkable, the sudden death of a child. Too often that shock is followed by silence, no specialist bereavement care, and no trained support for parents in the rawest of hours. Hospices are uniquely placed to deliver specialist mental health care safely and at scale if the system supports them to do so. Sarah Hodkinson is the head of Psychosocial Services at Shooting Star Children's Hospices, a leading multi-professional team delivering counselling, therapies and family support, and she joins me now. So Sarah, can you talk us through the disparity in services available to bereaved families?
Yes, so we held a national summit and we had 79 different organisations from around the country attend, and it included 34 children's hospices. And the reason we put the summit in was because this project that we've done in extending our support to families who experience the sudden death of a child has been so effective and so life-changing for them that we wanted to share everything we've learned with the other children's hospices around the country so that they could do this too. And we heard from families, we heard from experts in research and science, we heard from world leaders about this, and the family stories we heard at the summit, I can tell you that we will remember what they said and their cry for help, I think, for the rest of our lives. Well, they said when a Shooting Star family support worker walked into our home, they just knew we could help them. And so our plan with the summit was to share everything we've learned so that others could do this too, but also to think about how we can help hospices have the funding to do that. We've really gone out on our own and asked our community around us and begged through our fundraising to say, we know there are families that need our help. We know that as a children's hospice we can help them. Please, can you help us as a charity do that? But we need long-term funding. We need a recognition around the mental health issues for someone who is grieving. Add to that someone who is grieving the death of their child. And so part of our summit was to urge NHS leaders, government leaders, to embed this in national policy. I mean, Richard, there just needs to be a different understanding about the impact of grief on mental health. I don't think we've got the right words for it. When we say bereavement support, we all know when we lose a loved one, the impact is more than that, or it feels more than that. And when we have a child die, it is 100 times over. And at the moment, there's no commissioning for children's hospices to provide their specialist bereavement support. That's not okay. We really do want our summit to be a moment in time. And we're excited because all the other children's hospices want to do this, but we now need the support of the government and NHS leaders to help us.
So what specialist support should every family have when the unthinkable happens to their child?
Yeah, so we will walk into a family home with a family support worker, and they are there for everyone in that family. And they will tell you that every home they walk into, it looks a bit different and what the family need is a bit different. And so it is about individually looking at them and saying, what will you need in this moment? We will do memory making, where we're making keepsakes of fingerprints and handprints of the child, hand casts that the family can keep forever. We will be there to talk about how they can plan a funeral, how they can get in touch with the coroner about investigations that might happen. There's a lot in that immediate care that you just wouldn't know what to do because you've never in your life been in that circumstance before. But for us, that's every day. And when you're ready, we'll invite you to come to our bereavement cafe. You don't even have to talk the first time you come. And that's the case. There's so many of our families, they say, can I just come? And we're like, yes, you can join in a puzzle at the table. You don't have to speak to anybody, to the point at which they're there crocheting and making crafts and having cups of tea and building friendships that will last for life. We have counselling. I find that's a really interesting one around mental health. There's often these rules that you can't have counselling about grief for a few weeks after. Maybe that you need to be in a place where you are ready to talk about that, right? That doesn't work for the families we support because all you're doing is leaving them alone without the specialist help they need. And so we start our counselling straight away. And not just counselling, we find in those initial moments, we have a person in front of us saying, I can't breathe, I don't know what to do. And so we have these groups called Breathe, where we run through specific trauma stabilizing exercises, and it's a non-talking group so they don't have to feel threatened by having to talk it all through. And we give them techniques for sleeping, techniques for just getting through the next moments. But we're there for 3 years and 3 months. So there are counselling, trauma therapies, memorial days, family days. There is specialist child and adolescent therapies for siblings, not just siblings. As you can imagine, this affects everyone in that child's class, all their friendship group, their football team, their friends at their synagogue. Everyone is impacted by this death. And so we extend our support to that wider network. And because this affects people's lives for a long, long time, the ripple effects of a child death are unthinkable.
Yeah, as you say, it's that initial support, it's being there, it's all the things that maybe we don't think about as much for everyone that's affected. So that's at that level. But what kind of policy changes at a government level would you like to see implemented to address this?
Yes, so we have about a quarter, so 26% of our income comes from the government as a children's hospice, but that doesn't even cover the end-of-life care we give and the palliative care services. And by that I mean cover the doctors, the nurses, the therapists to be there, the equipment that is needed when a child is dying to ensure they are not in any pain, to ensure they get the absolute care they need. We only get 26% funding for that. So then let's come to bereavement. Let's talk about that, because we get 0% funding for the bereavement care that we give. Nothing of our services is commissioned for that. Sometimes recently the government gave some money towards capital builds. We are really, really grateful for that. That, once stretched across all the hospices in the country, will help sustain our buildings. But that isn't a long-term solution. We need to be able to employ the support workers. People listening will know the value of a support worker. We need to be able to employ counsellors who know how to counsel someone who's experienced a child's death. We need specialists in our service. We need that long-term funding. We need any funding more than zero, so that we can combine that support, the wonderful support our communities give, but give us some assurance so we can employ people and know that they are there to help families. So we need NHS leaders to listen, to embed this in national policy, to understand that bereavement is a mental health issue. This is part of mental health care. We love working alongside GPs, alongside those acute NHS services for mental health. But time and time again, they say, we don't know what we're doing with grief. We can put someone on suicide watch and our home treatment team will be there, but we need to work together. Yes, we are really happy to work together with you to safety plan around that family and to start thinking about what therapies are going to be helpful for them long term. It's something we do every day. So the government needs to support us so that we can work alongside the NHS in the way that we do and provide the mental health care that these families need.
And where can we find out more about what we've been talking about today?
Please look on our website, shootingstar.org.uk, and also look for your local children's hospice. So for those in Cornwall, Children's Hospice South West provide the most phenomenal care for children with life-limiting conditions and their families, and do support your local children's hospice to be able to reach further and help families affected by sudden and unexpected deaths.
That's Sarah Hodkinson, Head of Psychosocial Services at Shooting Star Children's Hospices. Thank you so much.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.
Thanks again to Sarah Hodkinson from Shooting Star Children's Hospice for being on the show.
That's all for today's programme.
If you've missed anything, you can download the podcast right now on Apple, Spotify and Amazon Podcasts.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear the new episode when it comes out, or listen back to any of our previous programmes.
For support or more information for better mental health, visit cornwallby.org or call the Mind Helpline during the office hours
on 0300 123 3393.
Or call the NHS Crisis Helpline on 111 and then press 2.
This gives you another way to get your urgent help if you're struggling with your mental health.
And you can call the Samaritans anytime for free on 116 123.
If you'd like to be a part of the show, you can get in contact via email, aspacetospeakyourmind@gmail.com.
You can also find out more about the show if you follow Cornwall Mind on Facebook or Instagram, or their website, cornwallmind.org.
A space to speak your mind with Cornwall Mind.